Howdy all, this is Shane. Welcome to the In the Blues Tone podcast. Firstly, thank you to all the new YouTube subscribers. I absolutely appreciate all the support. Some days I'm getting 80 to 100 new subscribers every day, so it's fantastic. So thanks again for the support. I'm trying to branch out the channel a little more, doing these podcasts and also doing some interviews coming up, as well as doing some mic demos, all that kind of thing, just to kind of mix it up from the pedals and amps. So the first thing I wanted to touch on today was basically some of my favorite albums of all times when it comes to blues and blues guitar and the stuff that sort of helped me grow musically, I guess, as well. So there's definitely a few in here that I've got. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to hold them up and show you some of these. Now, there's one that really made a difference to me wanting to play blues, and this was the first album that I really went, wow, I got to start learning how to do this stuff, was Eric Clapton, From the Cradle. It's the #1 best-selling blues CD of all time for a reason. It's fantastic. I was living in Michigan at the time, working in Torch Lake, and I heard this in the car, and the first song was Blues Before Sunrise, and I couldn't believe that was Eric Clapton. I knew a couple of his songs, but didn't realize he could sing blues like that. It was insane, and the guitars were awesome, and just the sound was amazing. And I've always wanted to kind of dabble in blues or get to learn it, I guess. I hadn't really played a whole lot of music before that, maybe just a little bit here and there, but when I heard that, I realized that if an English guy can play blues, maybe I can. So that was definitely the first inspiration on learning how to play, or wanting to play, was From the Cradle. It's still one of my favorite albums of all time. Has some of the best slow blues stuff on here as well. It's all done live in the studio, minus some, I think, harmonica overdubs. So yeah, I remember Eric Clapton saying that he recorded Hoochie Coochie Man so many times just in a day, just to try to get it the way that he wanted it. So they really put a lot of effort in, and much like the musos from back in the day, they did it live, which is how a blues album probably should be if you're talented enough. So big props to EC on this one. I think it's one of the best albums of all time. And here's another one that I absolutely loved for a long time. I still love this album. This is Buddy Guy's The Baddest Of. It's just like a greatest hits compilation, but it has a couple of live tracks on here as well, which are fantastic. I think they got so much vibe, and that's the thing about Buddy Guy. His live show is full of vibe. If you see him in a decent sized sort of setting, he's something else. So yeah, it's there's another favorite track on here is Midnight Train, which has Jonny Lang on it, which kind of led me into a Jonny Lang album called Wander This World. This wasn't his first one. His first one is all blues, but this is sort of like blues rock, and I'm a huge fan of this album. I think it's great. His vocal is awesome. His songs are great band, all that kind of stuff. Great tones. Definitely check out Jonny Lang, Wander This World as well. I think it's still a great album today. And through watching the Blues Brothers since I was a kid, got me into John Lee Hooker. I thought I'd buy a few of his albums, and this one's really cool. It's called Don't Look Back, and he does some stuff with Van Morrison on here as well, as a couple of other guys as well, and it's sort of like so laid back and cool. I think like all the songs are in E, or maybe there's like one or two in A or something like that. But yeah, it's just a really cool album. I usually just chuck this on and jam to it. It's got some great clean tones. It's not John Lee playing those parts, but some of the guitar playing on this is awesome. So yeah, definitely have a listen to that as well. It's got Lost Slow Boss on here as well. And yeah, it's cool. So speaking of Van Morrison, Too Long in Exile, which is mostly a blues album in some ways. It's also got some jazz and some other stuff on here as well, but I put jazz kind of in quotations. It's not like obscure jazz. It's that jazzy type of pop stuff that he does. But he does, Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, Till We Get the Healing Done, Wasted Years. There's so many great songs on here as well. So yeah, definitely give this one a listen. And the version of Gloria with John Lee Hooker is awesome, so definitely check that one out. Another one I always liked growing up, another album, was Robert Cray, The Score. I picked this up for a couple of bucks. I think I just bought it basically based on the cover. It sort of looked bluesy, and I kind of was onto a winner, and I didn't really realize who he was at the time. But yeah, his old blues stuff is great. I actually really like his new sort of soul direction that he's gone in as well. But in terms of great strat tone and clean tone and all that kind of thing, Robert Cray's playing is phenomenal. I think he's slightly underrated maybe as a guitarist. I think he's sort of always, or sometimes pushed back behind other players, but I think he's an absolute talent. So yeah, definitely check out The Score. It's a really cool album. Now there's a few others I've got here as well, and there's some that I haven't got here in front of me. So another one that I don't have in front of me right now is Albert King live in 1979. Such a great live album. The first tracks, I usually skip the first track, and the rest of the album is fantastic. So if you like Albert King and you're a big fan of live blues albums, definitely give that one a listen. It's still arguably the funkiest, coolest album I've got, and some of the slow blues are fantastic as well. Just super cool groove, 16th sort of notes on the drums all the way through the slow blues. It's something else. So definitely check that out. And talking about Stevie Ray, there's an album called In Session with Albert King and Stevie Ray. This was shot in Canada, one of my favorite blues albums of all time. And I'm not a huge fan of Stevie Ray, as a lot of people are. It's almost like cultish. But, when he's with Albert King, this was some of the best stuff I've ever heard. And together they're just a dynamite duo. I appreciate Stevie Ray Vaughan. I just can't listen to it much anymore. There's too many guys trying to emulate that, and it sort of killed it for me. But this album, definitely give it a listen, even if you are or you're not a fan of Stevie Ray. If you haven't heard this, definitely check it out, because with Albert King's vocals and guitar playing mixed with Stevie Ray's guitar playing, and great vibes all around. There's some little bits of talking they've left in here between tracks too, which is kind of amusing too. It's awesome. Alright, so some more modern stuff now. Tommy Castro would be one of the huge influences on my playing, and the Live at the Filmore album, I like all his albums. Let's just put that out there. I think he's phenomenal. I don't have somewhere in this case behind me, bookcase of CDs and DVDs, but the Live at the Filmore album is something else. If you haven't heard of Tommy Castro, or you have but you want to hear some of the best stuff, I think his live vibe is something else. Great showman, great singer, seems like a really nice guy, and he can play his ass off on guitar, and his band's phenomenal. So yeah, Tommy Castro Live at the Filmore is an awesome album. But like I said, his studio albums are great as well. Another modern guy that unfortunately died not long ago was Michael Burkes. Man, when I first heard Empty Promises, I was blown away. That guy, I would have loved to have seen him live. He's kind of got the voice of Albert King, very similar sort of tonality maybe as Albert King, but he could just rip, and not in a sort of nonsense way, in an absolute great way, and he was one of the best. So yeah, definitely check out him as well. And this is another Tommy Castro album there. Another favorite sort of new guy, and this will probably get a lot of hate as well, but John Mayer, his Continuum album is awesome. But I actually really started to appreciate him more on the Trio album that he did with Pino Palladino and Steve Jordan on drums. That album is absolutely awesome. So I've got that back here somewhere as well. But yeah, definitely check out Try by the John Mayer Trio. That album has some great blues. It has some great blues rock. It's got a couple of really cool covers and some of his new songs, which I sort of feel that work better in a three-piece than the sort of studio-fied thing, but that's just me. Going back older as well, I'm going to go back to T-Bone Walker. Definitely one of my favorites. I could listen to that guy all day. It's got such a great vibe. His playing's phenomenal. It's ahead of his time. He's one of the first guys to do some sort of crazy stuff on stage with the guitar as well. The way he played was kind of innovative and unique, and just really soulful vocals. I love his voice, man. T-Bone's just one of the best. And if you're not sort of familiar with the older blues, T-Bone's a great place to start, and you'll see where I get a lot of my licks from. All right, this is kind of like borderline pop rock or whatever, but when this came out, this is Blood Sugar Sex Magic by the Chili Peppers. This was something that made me like guitar very, very much when I first heard it. And, this is timeless, this album. I've listened to this a million times. I like all kinds of music, by the way. I'm not just a blues guy, but in terms of me wanting to play guitar, this was also a huge, huge influence. Some of the first songs I learned on guitar were from this album as well. As best as I could work them out at the time. But it's a really, really cool album. And if you're a guitar player, even if you're a blues guy, you'll probably like this. I guess everyone's heard this by now, but it's definitely one of those albums that you got to hear at some point in time. I've kind of left out a lot of other stuff like Dr. John and Ray Charles, all that kind of stuff, the things that I love, but that aren't really guitar focused. But one other thing that I got to bring up is Mark Knopfler and JJ Cale. Both these two guys are phenomenal. It's funny, I listened to JJ Cale a long time ago, and I guess since being in the US so often, I haven't had a chance to, or I've had a chance to maybe appreciate that kind of vibe a lot more. And my next album is going to be that kind of music. I absolutely love it. I think it's a great feel and nice and chilled, and I loved his vocal. His vocal's just so relaxed. And same with Mark Knopfler. They're very similar artists in some way, although Mark Knopfler's got his big band production stuff, but his solo work is very, very similar, kind of laid back, tasty vocal parts that just work. Both these guys, you could argue they're not the greatest singers ever, but their voice really just suits their music unbelievably well, and that's the trick. I think both these guys, great songwriters, great players. Mark Knopfler can play anything extremely well, and they're both dudes. So that's a bit of a look at some of the stuff that I guess influenced me to want to pick up the guitar. And I remember hearing Sultans of Swing around the same time. I think I got back from the US. I mean, I'd heard that song for years, but after hearing from the Cradle album, going back to Sultans of Swing and Lady Rider and all these songs, I realized, wow, I really like this whole, play and then sing thing, having a pause, adding some licks and singing. And then, the whole world opened up musically. I got into U2, which led me to B.B. King, When Love Comes to Town, all that kind of stuff. Rattle and Hum also has to be up there with one of my favorite albums of all time. Might not be a blues album all the way through or whatever, but it definitely has that Americana sound. Sorry, that was my watch machine on the table. And that Rattle and Hum album has a lot of soul, man. It's a really cool album, and I love what BB and the boys do together on that track. It's really something else. So I thought I'd use the podcast to maybe share some of my favorite music. Look, I've got loads and loads of CDs and albums on my computer. Another guy I'm getting into is Derek Trucks band, man. I'm really digging that a lot lately, and not just because of the fact I got an SG recently, but I think I'm starting to come around to the slide guitar thing a lot more now. I'm actually starting to learn a bit because of that. And he's got some great tunes and a great vocalist and a great band. So if you're watching on YouTube, please let me know what you think of some of my favorite artists and blues guys in the genre, as well as what are some of yours as well. So leave all your comments if you are on YouTube watching this. And if you're at guitarpedaldemos.com, you can leave all your comments on the Facebook plugin.